let's delve into that topic. All right. So for the uninitiated, delve is one of the newly restricted ChatGPT auto-generate words. So yeah, it's a good question. Really, really good question. So this depends on the medium, right? There is a concept in security called steganography, which is the art of hiding information inside of other information. It's been around for centuries. You look at paintings, and the authors would hide their names somewhere in like a leaf or something. I mean, this stuff has been around forever. It goes as far as to see conspiracy theories, or the first letter of every word in this news article is a secret message to me. It's like, all right, well, it gets a little wild when you start thinking about that, but it's not too unusual to hide information inside of other information. You can do this easily with things like images, and you can do it easily with video and to a certain extent audio. You cannot easily do it with text, right? So the short answer to your question is it depends on the medium. If it's a video, sure, video watermarking has some very highly accurate methodologies. Audio, absolutely, right? You can certainly watermark audio more easily than text, I'll say. But the text, we have yet to see it. I mean, it's, I would say, probably the hardest problem for the industry to solve. And of course, there's some words that just get bad raps, like we're seeing in that. That list is kind of changing over time. But I think that's a poor way to go about it. The way that I've best seen text like that, showing up to try to determine if something has been used with text. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, this is one of the biggest problems that we had previously. One other firm that we work with that does security and privacy at the software level said, I'm trying my best to get people to understand how they can subscribe to our security services, and what's the best way that we can get their interest on that. And I'm pretty candid with this type of stuff, and I just said, like, look, like, you're not going to like my answer here, but the answer is you got to show where someone else got their head blown off. That's what's going to get people to do it. I said, I'm serious, like, if you're on a block of people and you've got a bunch of homes in a row, you care about security, you kind of don't, and then somebody's house gets broken into, all their shit's missing, and now all of a sudden everybody gets a new security system. Okay, so to a certain extent, you don't want to be taking out an insurance policy after the house burns down or over provisioning your security services, but there's a minimum discipline to that, which again is a whole separate conversation around things like NIST and CIS security controls that we adhere to. But that's a whole separate conversation. I wish, I hope, and I evangelize that this is taken more seriously. It is a defense in depth mechanism, but yeah, AI right now, oh boy. I mean, if you can't erase data from your AI system, I mean, that's a real fundamental problem with the way you're operating with it and the way you're co-opting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vibe It Up, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of tech. I'm your host, Dan Tudorache, and I bring over 20 years of experience in the software development industry, wearing multiple hats as a solution architect in AI, leadership coach, trainer, and now as a psychologist too. Now, you might be wondering, what's the vibe all about? Well, Vibe It Up is not just a podcast, it's a community, a space where we connect with tech professionals from directors of engineering, solution architects, software architects, and inspiring team leaders. And I have with me today Michael Silva. Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing good, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Sure, sure. Could you tell me a little about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I suppose most people are here for AI, so I can tell you a little bit about AI first. Although I am a father of 4 young boys under 8 years old. As far as the AI space goes, I'm founder and CEO of Emely AI, which is a Microsoft solution that draws the shortest, straightest line from an employee's question to the answer. It's highly secure. Professionally, I have my master's degree in cybersecurity and criminal justice out of Northeastern in Boston. I also have my bachelor's degree in information technology, and I also run another company, which actually is the genesis for Emely AI. I run the managed services business called Archon One, where we provide security and compliance services to law firms in New York City. That's a very specific focus. Prior to that, I ran IT departments for private and publicly traded companies, and there's more to it, but I'm happy to hear the questions that you have around AI for today.
Sure, sure. How's the man behind all these roles, Michael? Who is Michael?
It's a great question. Well, on a continuous self improvement journey, right? I think that one of the most important things that we need to do is focus on what tools can help us do. Especially in regards to AI and things that they shouldn't be used for. I have a traditional engineer mentality. I did 4.5 years of engineering at RPI, and I'm constantly looking for ways to remove things from an equation and make them work better. Right? There's elegance and simplicity. And I'm seeing a lot of that in the opposite direction today with AI. There's a lot of folks out there that are trying to add AI in. And, I saw a funny comic earlier about a guy on the back of a boat. He's got a girl with a martini glass next to him. And, as everybody's partying up front, and the girl in the back goes, "Hey, how did you get the money for this boat and the project?" And the guy says, "I don't know. I took the same project I started with last month, but I just relabeled it AI." And on the back, you can see it says AI is the name of the ship. You know? So I feel like a lot of people are on that mindset. And I think it's fine to incorporate, but I do feel like there's just a fundamental opportunity and lack of understanding in the space that could really make this happen. Part of it's a continuous evolution of tools, and part of it is just people trying to jump on the bandwagon. So what we're trying to do is to provide some clarity in our experience, real world working with managing partners, boards of directors, other CEOs and executives, helping to understand what can you and what should you be doing with it, and what you should not be doing with it.
Mm. Yeah, there are a lot of could and should or not should shouldn't. Yeah. So, what was your, I don't know, start in tech? Did you had a passion for, I don't know, software development? What was that drive?
Ooh. Constructs and Legos were my start in tech when I was really young, because I didn't really appreciate the engineer mindset, and I'm trying to impart that onto my son, starting with my oldest son. Mark Rober has a little box called the Build Box. He's the guy that made the glitter bomb. It's actually really funny. You should check it out if you haven't seen it already. But starting off with engineering as a mindset is really something that I think a lot of people grow up with. I'm not saying you can't change that field later, but it's a certain way of developing a solution. So, of course, like I've come to learn, many other people have a similar story. We were given a small computer, and you're looking at a guy that played Oregon Trail on the Apple computers when they were a little kid with the floppy disks when they were actually floppy. So, I've seen everything from Prodigy's Homework Helper through dial-up systems to AOL and Rayman and hacking and Doty's decompiler and VB6, and now where everything's in the cloud, which is great. Cloud is just someone else's computer. So we're seeing a lot of that now. But I think that the in terms of the development of this, it's really just been a passion of mine, and I think that that's something that I encourage a lot of people to reevaluate with themselves. The trends change. I did my master's in cybersecurity a number of years ago, and I did it because it was fun. I did my license for installing burglar alarms, fire alarms, and surveillance cameras in New York City because it was fun. Right? We don't install fire alarms. I was just curious how it worked, and I feel like it's important that everybody's on that continuous learning journey, and I believe in it so much that I went back to teach for 11 years as a university professor at NYT. And I taught over 50 college courses, so not individual classes, like 15-week courses, 50 of them over 11 years. And I have a great network of people who I'm in touch with today who have moved on to really exciting roles. And I've moved away from that because you do something for a decade and you want to move on to the next decade. So at this point, we're providing continuing education services to attorneys. We're providing professional and private consultations on strategy, and I'm still doing a lot of that teaching and development. But yeah, it's still, I guess the point I'm getting to is it is still a continuous learning journey that I'm very happy to be a part of.
Yeah, and the continuous change in tech, the continuous technologies, tools, and all these things need a continuous learning for that, and a big attention and eye on the security of everything we use today, because we had so many applications installed on our phones, on our laptops, and everything. It's about what and how we share our data, and what we access and how we access, and what we share on the internet. because yeah, but how you mentioned about you mentioned about Emily. What was the why behind doing it and building that type of
Yeah, so that's a really really good question. Why do we do it? Well, there's a philosophical reason and a technical reason. So I'll give you the technical reason because that story is a lot more fun, I think. The reality is we were just tired of answering the same questions again and again and again. Right. So from an IT standpoint, we provide certain standards, and like I said, we provide cybersecurity and compliance services for some of New York City's highest performing law firms. And in doing so, the standards that we provide have the same answer. But the questions that we get are often a little bit different because they're coming from cybersecurity liability insurance companies. They're coming from, external auditors. They're coming from clients. Like some of our attorneys, their clients are banks, and they have their own internal auditing department. They all ask the same question, but they ask it in such a slightly different way that it's just annoying enough that the compliance guy doesn't understand what it means, and it's just detailed enough that they can't quite answer it. So, it has to come to us, and the questions are all the same. So we developed Emily AI to answer those questions, and then I partnered with a gentleman named Michael Gershfeld, aka Gersh. He's my partner in the business there, along with our head of development. And what we found was that there was an application well beyond just the IT side. Folks needed correct answers, and what I kind of have made a long term bet on is the importance of security and accuracy in the information that's returned. So over the last year, we've started to see some of the dividends of that. You can see what people think are hallucinations coming out of ChatGPT and others. And I'm sure if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see I post about this constantly. It's not a hallucination. It's by design. All right. The systems are statistically programmed probabilistic algorithms whose purpose is to guess the next word. It is literally taking one word and guessing what should come next. So when you're doing that, you get a mirror of your own data in what looks like a very well constructed answer. But if you ask it a question like, if it takes 15 minutes to dry, 10 towels in the sun, how long does it take to dry 20 towels? And then the thing starts doing math. Right. Right. So, it's one of these situations where better, the AI doesn't know any better, and people are like, "Oh my god, it's hallucinating." And no, it's doing exactly what it's expected to do. It's a machine, right? And this is the last thing I'll say on this is just around forgiveness and self-compassion. We are very, very, very understanding when it comes to human error. You know, you show up somewhere you're not supposed to, you misunderstand. We have zero tolerance for machines making mistakes. So there's this double standard, where you've got on one hand, oh, you made a mistake. Oh, no problem. Yeah, yeah. We don't call it a hallucination. We call it a mistake, right? Or lapse in judgment, whatever you want to call it. Right? A machine makes that. Oh, the entire thing's garbage. It's crap. I can't use it. This is why would you bring this to me? How can I depend on it? So we're kind of given that unfair standard. And when we developed it, we originally started for that just accurate, repetitive answer, but then we came to realize there's a bigger industry problem. And the problem is that the solutions of these wrapper products that we're seeing on the market today that just plug in around GPT 3.5 or 4, Mistral or whatever, are still guessing. And the worst part that I've seen is that they're coming from folks who have no idea that AI existed 20 or 30 years ago. They don't understand the concept of knowledge graphs. They see GPT 3.5, and this is the genesis of artificial intelligence. They're not seeing GPT 2.0 or GPT 1, right? Oh my God, like GPT 3.5, this is the beginning. It just happened right now. I don't think so. Did you forget about GPT beta? Yeah, what about GPT 3.0? Like, do you think that maybe that was there before? Maybe you just noticed it now? So, that's kind of the unfortunate reality, and that creates a ton of noise. We're still seeing that today. That's kind of ebbing out as some of the venture capital dries up from firms that have not been able to deliver real value propositions. And we see that most starkly in the OpenAI store, the GPT store, which I'll tell you for the sake of this podcast, I compare to a room full of used toys at a toddler's daycare the night before they get cleaned up. Right? A great set of ideas that everybody loved using for a short period of time that are now filthy and nobody really wants to deal with. Right? So the question is really, how do you take the power of that platform, right? The true power of the AI, apply it in a way that's going to meet GDPR compliance, that's going to be functional with a real business use case that someone's going to actually want to open up and use, that actually saves them time or help them with their job, and do it in a secure way where you're not leaking out personal information to everybody else. And that's the philosophical reason. That's what we set out to solve. But at the end of the day, yeah, of course, it's about performance and questioning and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I was wondering because you said um, about the history of AI, and how do you measure now the performance of your system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, it's kind of a loaded question because there's a couple of ways you could measure it. I mean, ultimately, we measure it based on client satisfaction. Ultimately, right? No, I'm being serious about it because it's a traditional way, but it takes into account the fact that there are other systems that might be in place that you have to deal with that didn't come out before that are going to change the client's opinion of what you see and do immediately, and it was little to do with your previous efforts in that regard. Their opinion, right? I mean, hopefully, you can see every problem coming, but that's one way. The performance measurement from a technical level, there have been several studies done based on the amount of audience attrition in response time on how many hundredths of a millisecond you lose. Amazon did a great study on this earlier. I think it was some percentage. It was a non inconsequential amount of audience that just left because they didn't get a response back within 200 milliseconds as opposed to 300. So there's that type of performance that you refer to. Then there's also the accuracy of the information that's returned, right? So the accuracy is a really, really, really good question to answer because it borders on the philosophy of what is true, right? So you say, okay, well, what is true? Well, it's what I know to be true. How do you know it to be true? Well, it's written down. Okay, well, who wrote it down? Oh, this authoritative guy. Okay, so therefore, if this authoritative guy says something, it must be true, right? Well, usually, okay, and that's kind of where it begins. So the question is really the data set that you're using. In terms of the accuracy of that information, yeah, technically, for the engineers on this call, I'm sure you're familiar with RAGAS and other models where you can calculate a confidence score and you can say, oh, this is close enough to the answer. I believe it's this. Here's my degree of confidence, right? At the end of the day, though, the human in the loop is such a critical part of that equation. They need to be told, the human needs to tell the end user ultimately whether the answer is what it's supposed to be, right? If it actually is accurate, it'll get left alone. It'll be marked as a helpful answer. If it's not, it's something that needs to be refined. And that human in the loop model is such a critically important part of performance, as you mentioned, because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like one easy thing. I'm not sure if you caught a glimpse of Grok, not Elon Musk's Grok, but GROQ. Right, there was a site there that for a brief period of time produced responses that were so fast you couldn't even read them. Right. And it was amazing. Everybody flocked to it. They're, oh my God, look at how fast this is. And then the next thing was, people were like, is it really accurate? And they were like, no, it's not really. Okay. So it's like a fast car that you really can't set the direction on. Okay. That's kind of interesting. And then the next question, which is really, you get down to like the application performance level of like, how does this impact the user? It's so fast you can't read it. Okay. So if you're answering something so fast you can't read it, cool. But now you're like, how is this useful? Right. So then you start thinking about other things like maybe a machine should be reading the output of this instead of a human being. Like that would be a cool use for this. But now you're kind of going backwards into the use case, which isn't really the intended performance that you set out to do. Now you're back in like R&D exploratory land. Right. So there's that level of performance as well. So I feel like, when you say like how is the performance and what do you measure it against? I mean, you really have these three areas, right? I mean, you've got the first area of, is it actually doing something for the end user? And then you also have the area of how fast is it actually responding? And then you've got the third area of is you solving a problem? Like, how does the solution perform? Is it actually doing something for you? Or is it just looking really cool? Did you turn a horse 8 different colors, over the course of 10 minutes in ChatGPT? Like, did that make you feel good? Okay, how's that helping you? It performed, right? To what end?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yes, indeed. We have not physical, but the speed of the system, and we have the accuracy of the answer given there, and it's a little different than the videos which are already annotated, and the systems learn from those annotation, and the LLMs are functioning a little different in here. And how is this perform the accuracy because you can measure in terms of percent the how right or wrong was the model giving an answer. But how is this when they calculate the next word and they predict the next word? It's not the same thing, right?
No, it's not actually, and that's why it's generative, right? And I think that that's the big reason why the big investment banks like Sequoia Capital won't get behind any of the larger new AI systems that come out. Like you'll see a Mistral come out every now and again, or a Claude, or something like that. But if you go right now to the major investment firms in Silicon Valley and you say to them, "Hey, I got a new AI engine," they're not going to give you anything. And I'm not saying that because I know, not saying that because we asked, I just happened to know it, right? Because we turned down investment capital when we built Emely AI originally for other reasons, and along that journey, that's what I came to realize. And the reason is exactly what you're saying, right? Which is that the model functions in a particular way. It's going to end up being a component of something else, and that part is either going to work or it's not. And in that regard, what I think a lot of folks overlook is AI is just software, the way you're seeing it today. And if you break down what is software, software is the automation of manual tasks. So if software is automating manual tasks, what manual task are you automating? Seriously. And so this is it, right? This is the use case. Okay, so you've got AI on one end of it as software, but what is AI actually doing? You know what I mean? And that's like, I feel like a lot of people just skip over that part. So, anyways, but yeah, you're correct. That is by design.
Yes, indeed. But let's get back a little to human, because humans are the ones that using the AIs, and the design is made to help humans in their day-to-day tasks, in what they need to do. And I do wonder how is the development of education right now in terms of using more of what we have in AI, and how is that impacting our knowledge and overall science in general.
This is a fascinating question. Okay, so I mentioned before that I taught for 11 years as a university professor. All right, that was over at New York Institute of Technology, NYIT. During my time there, actually in the very beginning, I created and taught two Cisco networking academies, meaning that prior to my involvement there was no Cisco presence. Our company furnished the equipment, built the labs, designed the course. I actually went upstate to get my certification to be able to teach the class. Then went on to actually teach the class for I think 3 years or so. After that was done, it was a new college class, and along the way, it had to be accredited. So that's what happens when you build something totally new, right? Some colleges are doing this, but here's the challenge: any respectable educational institute has to go through an accreditation process. The accreditation process is slow, very slow. Universities are slow to change, not because they don't want to move faster. It's because there's a big divide between when a student signs up and says, "This is what the curriculum is, and this is what I'm going to get out of the class," and what's actually delivered can take a year or two for the whole process to occur. Enrollment, everything else. Now, I'm not saying classes don't change, but the root of the issue is that there needs to be a certain amount of material that's true to the course as it's listed, and a certain percentage of the material that's brand new. So when you have anything that's wildly disruptive, you've got two options. Either A, you can launch it as a separate boot camp or a brand new class, brand new course, or B, you try to add it into the existing education system. When you choose the latter, you have very little wiggle room. It's the easiest way to go. You say to the professor, "Hey, you got 1 or 2 weeks out of the course to add something new in. We want to keep current on the latest stuff." But now you're dedicating 8% of your, to the thing that's making the news. So 92% of the class is going to be the stuff they're used to seeing. So, education in that regard, trying to provide the education is something you almost have to do independently. And that's why we offer, the separate CLE classes, and, we offer the different types of private education and things like that, because you really can't get that today unless you're going to a trade school or something that's got a specific certification, and there's a big race to that. MIT has their management AI program. They recently raised like a $3,000 class as of today, which is April 2024, right? Um, but yeah, if you want to actually, on the other end of it, if you want to learn, there's the challenge of who you're learning from, right? And I wrote about this at length earlier, but just to get it out in the open, you got to be careful who you're learning your stuff from, right? Because there's a lot of people who claim to know what they're doing and actually don't have the technical background to provide the advice and guidance. Like these are guys, like I worked 20 years ago in a solution called HP Operations Orchestration, right? This is before Zapier was even really as popular or big of a thing as it was. It's a drag and drop. If this Windows service fails, then do this. Okay. Today you're seeing this advent of low code, no code, and you get guys out there, showing off their Airtable skills, and they're like, "Hey, I'm a software developer." When I was growing up, we called them script kiddies, right? Which is cool, but it's not anything fundamentally different than what's been done before. It's just got a new look on it. It's like, look. I mean, I know you love your wife, but she's wearing a new dress today. It's the same wife, Like, I mean, it's like, come on, man. Like I love this shit too, but it's not really that different. You know, it just looks a little different. So I would say that when you're looking on the education side, trying to consume, it's very important you understand who you're getting that information from. But conversely, on the educator side, privately, you've got a lot of leeway, right? But within other institutions where it's a little more regulated, like that with ABET and others, those are the challenges you run into. So as a student of that material, those are some things to consider when you're trying to keep up on the latest.
Yes, indeed. And now there are a lot of platforms that you can go and buy a course, and you don't know who made that. Actually, you can see the name, but you were right because you don't know what's in there and how accurate it is in today's market. And you can get out from there with wrong or up. Outdated information. So
The whole reason why we built the AI platform. I mean, you could be misinformed by the ChatGPT's biggest problem until very, very recently was that it had no sources included. No idea where the information came from. That's a huge problem. And then even when you cite your sources, you got to make sure the sources are reliable. I mean, the rabbit hole just keeps getting deeper.
yes, and it continues this way until we can curate that information somehow and get, I don't know, a stamp. But what do you think about? There are a lot of people now trying to not to guess, but to offer a percentage for a text or for a video or for an image to if that was generated by AI or not, right? And how do you think we can make this more accurate in order to guess better?
Let's delve into that topic. All right. So for the uninitiated, delve is one of the newly restricted ChatGPT auto generate words. So yeah, it's a good question. Really, really good question. So this depends on the medium, right? There's a concept in security called steganography, which is the art of hiding information inside of other information. It's been around for centuries. You look at paintings, and the authors would hide their names somewhere in like a leaf or something. I mean, this stuff has been around forever. It goes as far as to see conspiracy theories, or the first letter of every word in this news article is a secret message to me. It's like, all right, well, it gets a little wild when you start thinking about that, but it's not too unusual to hide information inside of other information. You can do this easily with things like images, and you can do it easily with video and to a certain extent audio. You cannot easily do it with text, right? So the short answer to your question is it depends on the medium. If it's a video, sure, video watermarking has some very highly accurate methodologies. Audio, absolutely, right? You can certainly watermark audio more easily than text, I'll say. But text, we have yet to see it. I mean, it's I would say probably the hardest problem for the industry to solve. And of course, there's some words that just get bad raps, like we're seeing in that. That list is kind of changing over time. But I think that's a poor way to go about it. The way that I've best seen text like that, showing up to try to determine if something has been used with text. As much as I hate to say it, you look for some of the common phrases that come out. Um, you know, like the word delve, or as of my latest knowledge update. We see that one quite a bit, right? If that's showing up in a research paper, bro, you're screwed. Like, so, but it's hard. It really is hard because you don't really know, and particularly as generative AI gets better and better, you won't know. But my general position on that is it shouldn't matter if you understand where the data is coming from, right? So one super easy example of a way that you wouldn't necessarily need to care about watermarking would be if you're on an audio call and you're transcribing it, and then someone has a question about what happened during the meeting. Do you really need to worry about watermarking it? Probably not, right? Because you know it's a generative summary, right? Or even if someone else passed it along and they said, "Hey, here's a note," would it really matter if they didn't represent it as being AI generated? If it came from a meeting that occurred where you knew what the person said? Like, so it's a real open question. I'm not saying no, because I'm really big into presenting the truth as the truth atomically on its own. But the detection of it, the automatic detection, uh, video, yes. Audio, pretty good shot. Text, good luck. I'd like to see some more on it.
Yeah, but I've used 3.5 ChatGPT for generating text, and always it has the same, almost the same way of structuring text, way of starting the phrases, and it also has some keywords and words that always repeat, like always. it's, it's there. So at a point you can generally see by you by your own that was generated. Okay, so let's turn back a little on the human side, because we discuss a lot of about the AI and the impact on the performance of employees and humans in general. But um, what about the other skills that we need for the future? Because yeah, definitely we need to have a good grasp on how to use AI tools and be sure what is secure or not and not, where we should give our data on and publish it on internet, and trying to generate something from a PDF which is internal from our company. And definitely good education should be done in this direction, that okay, you don't have to do that because it's not secure, and you're giving away your data from the company, private data. But how do we develop for the future human personality and human skills rather than AI, right? Because it's a lot of focusing on AI, on tech, but what about the rest?
Yeah, really good question. So you brought up a couple of questions that I want to make sure that we tackle uh, properly, because there's really important things you mentioned. The first thing you mentioned is around identifying the use of the way to handle a tool like this properly, and how to benefit from it, how to handle it effectively. And the second thing you brought up is privacy. I'm going to put privacy on the shelf for a second because it's a very important and loaded topic. Um, Regarding using these tools, this is not our first rodeo as a species dealing with this, right? If you went to the candle maker and you said, "How do I make this room brighter?" They're going to give you a better candle. They won't give you the light bulb, right? I think Ford also said it nicely when he said, "If I asked my customers, what they wanted, they tell me a faster horse." Right. So I feel like AI has a somewhat orthogonal way of solving these problems. And when I say these problems, I mean looking at what you're trying to do and automate your workload, getting better insights, like the dream of AI of what it's supposed to be. You have to think differently about it, and it's just it's a paradigm shift mentally. And I think that this has a lot to do with some fundamentals of how you understand AI to work, and what it's not capable of doing reliably is a big part of it. But also, you have to have some imagination. You really got to think, like, what if this, like that Einstein style, perpetual curiosity, like, what would happen if this, you know and I think that a lot of people get caught up in the what happens when things go wrong, and very few people think what happens if things went really right, right? So, all right, so not taking like India's position on this, where everything's got to get approved through their Department of Commerce or whatever. At this point they're stifling their own AI. Europe is not too far behind. They've introduced AI regulations, and I believe that there should be better regulations in the tech space in general, because for privacy purposes, which I'll get to in a second. But Europe is in part, regulating things that they don't fully understand, that will be developed by other countries that they have no control over, and that they're then going to have to deal with the result of after they've stifled their own teams. So it's a good effort. I think it needs to be done, but that's all a work in progress. So I guess the short answer in terms of using it is you need to find people who are educated in this space to help guide you along how to think about it, because it's not just, can I use it for this purpose, or like what's the next thing? A Harvard Business Review, I think 6 months ago, did a great article on this. They had to break out little bullet points that showed you what AI is currently used for, what's not. Number one is like creativity. Number two is like marketing, content, all the stuff you've already seen, right? And what people are looking for is like that new thing, that the secret of like, oh, what can AI do that like no one else is doing? I mean, that's going to be a very personal question. And it's going to be different for everybody. So it goes back to the mindset change. It's the candle light bulb. It's the horse, combustion engine thought process. Okay, this is what we have today. This is our current state. This is the future state. How do we do this, right? And that's a totally different conversation. Now, the side effect of this is like any new technology, right? You have to be willing to part ways with some level of the way things were to get to where you are. And in a lot of cases, it's going to be things you don't expect. And I think that a lot of things that people didn't pay attention to, that I was kind of, rabidly vocal about, is the privacy end of things. And I'll cover this shortly, in a short amount of time, rather, because I feel very passionately, and I could go on for a while about this. Privacy is a human right, and you should be able to keep things private. The easiest way to keep something private, the easiest way, you want to know the easiest way, if you could think of one way, the surefire way to keep something private? You got it. That's exactly right. That's what my father always said to me. You don't want somebody to know something? Don't tell them. Now, I mean, okay, maybe not going to be the case if you're walking across the street. Did you cross the street? Okay, well, besides things like that, right? But if you don't want somebody to read something, don't write it down. I mean, this is really the most basic. So the next thing is, okay, well, let's presume you have to write it down. Okay, the next best way is encryption, right? And if you've got a proper encryption algorithm, and then you're fine, right? And there's questions on, should the encryption strength be in nobody knows how the algorithm works, right? But then one guy cracks it and then it's gone. That's exactly what happened with DECSS and DVDs back in the day. People printed the decoding code on T-shirts and sold them for fun. All right. Because there was only like 12, I think, different decoding mechanisms. I think it was like Sony or somebody like leaked one, and then anybody could decode a DVD, and suddenly the encryption algorithm didn't matter. But then on the other hand, you give out AES 256, which is a great encryption algorithm. It's open source. Anybody can use it. It relies on the strength of the key. But then you get Mujahideen Secrets 2 from a terrorist organization who's using it to encrypt their communications that you can't break, because the strength lies in the key. Okay, so which one of these is better, right? So this is really the core tenets of privacy, and unfortunately, because those two things are so central to the concept of whether or not something is going to remain private or not, when you start looking at other tools, unless that's a part of the design, you lend yourself to risk. And what we see today, and particularly here in the States, is we see a lot of companies that just take advantage of the lack of privacy regulations, and they make money off of it. And one of my favorite pinatas to beat up on this is our friend Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook, where he started one of the world's most valuable companies, and his opening folly was, "They trust me, dumb schmucks," but he didn't use the word schmucks, right? So like, how could that succeed? Like on a business, on a business that's predicated on personal information, how could that succeed? And I think the answer to it is what we're seeing today in ChatGPT's implementation, which is that people just don't care, right? They don't care until they really care. They don't care until their information's hacked, and then all of a sudden it's a big deal. And then even then, it gets even worse in the States, where you look at like companies like Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. When was the last time you sent them your credit information? And somehow they have every transaction. And then when they get hacked, they offer you identity protection services as a service. That's like the most American thing that could possibly happen. They get hacked after collecting data that you didn't authorize them to collect, to then sell you a service to protect you against a future hack. It's like, excuse me? Like, oh my God. Yes. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like Minority Report meets Inception. It's unreal. So, I think that that's a whole separate problem. Like I said, that's independent of the podcast here that we were talking about. But I think, unfortunately, one of the casualties of war, as we make progress towards AI across this front of uncertainty, is privacy, and security. And that's one of the things that I kind of obsessed over the design when we built out the AI platform that we designed, because without something like that baked in from the ground up, without some type of expertise guiding the product along the way, you end up with this, right? You end up with a client. Hey, you were the only person who I sent this document to. How did this become public? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, let's, let's find out. And there you have it, right? So, anyways, I'll stop there because privacy is a favorite topic of mine, as you can see.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. Because when I worked as a consultant and I was in the pre-sales department and technical sales department, when we sold and sold a project, it was very very hard, long not so long time ago, to sell also extra security services with that, or to include security services in the price, because they wanted to have all the price the price per project split, and they say, okay, we don't need security. So yeah, and after something came up, they say, okay, now we need security because we had the breach and we don't know what to do it.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, this is one of the biggest problems that we had. Previously, one other firm that we work with that does security and privacy at the software level said, I'm trying my best to get people to understand how they can subscribe to our security services, and what's the best way that we can get their interest on that. And I'm pretty candid with this type of stuff, and I just said, like, look, like, you're not going to like my answer here, but the answer is you got to show where someone else got their head blown off. That's what's going to get people to do it. I said, I'm serious. Like, if you're on a block of people and you've got a bunch of homes in a row, you care about security, you kind of don't. And then somebody's house gets broken into, all their shit's missing. And now all of a sudden, everybody gets a new security system. Okay. So, and to a certain extent, you don't want to be taking out an insurance policy after the house burns down or over provisioning your security services. But there's a minimum discipline to that, which again is a whole separate conversation around things like NIST and CIS security controls that we adhere to. But that's a whole separate conversation. I wish, I hope, and I evangelize that this is taken more seriously. It is a defense in depth mechanism, but yeah, AI right now. Oh boy, I mean, if you can't erase data from your AI system, I mean, that's a real fundamental problem with the way you're operating with it and the way you're cooperating with it. But
Hmm. Yeah, I do one have one question for you regarding not security, not this thing, but more private, to say like that. And if you were to meet someone, and it should be in tech or not in tech, whatever it is, someone you look up to, who would that be and why?
who do I look up to in technology? Oh boy, I mean, that depends on what they're doing. There isn't any single person. No, seriously, there isn't. The people who I look for inspiration for technology have mostly passed away. I feel like the current slate of people have, I mean, the big guys that make the news, the guys that I publish quotes about and stuff like that. I mean, we're fleeting glimpses in the land of tech. I mean, the guys that have made really instrumental, monumental changes over the course of our history are scientists who are not alive today. These are the guys who I really look to for inspiration. And I think that in terms of modern day, yeah, I mean, there's too many people for me to be able to tell you. I'm not going to tell you, oh, it's Jeff Bezos, it's Elon Musk, it's Bill Gates, it's Satya Nadella, it's any of these guys. I mean, look, some of these guys have cool stories. Satya is the CEO of Microsoft. I think he's been there for 25 or 30 years. He was the head of product at Microsoft Excel. I mean, that's a hell of a journey, you know. Altman's in the news now, but I mean, there's other folks there that have done really well. But if you really want to look back and you really want to dial back, it's the guys that sat there running experiment after experiment after experiment, trying and trying and trying, and not succeeding when they got their goal, but succeeding when they went, oh, that's interesting. Huh, what happened? What? Wait, what was that? right? Like those are the guys that I like to follow, right? Like that, because it's almost like a philosophical discipline to operate like that. Just staying curious. It's not about like the guy that's got the biggest bullhorn who's shouting out about their product or service and trying to make the most noise for their own interest today. It's about understanding, from a real like academic and scientific perspective, like how are you really developing? Like who are the guys that really made an effort to go back, make themselves and their organizations 1% better than yesterday? Like those are the guys that I look to. It's not necessarily like the guy that's on Twitter today with the loudest voice. So if hope that makes sense.
Totally makes sense, and thank you for your answer. And as we prepare for closing, is there a particular piece of advice or insight you would like to leave with the audience today?
Uh, if you've made it this far in the podcast, thanks for listening. Because we've been on now for about 42 minutes. So I'll keep the closing short. I would say stay curious and network with people who can help to bring out that level of curiosity and intellect. I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to talk to anybody that's here. I run several podcasts, and if there's anything that I could do to open up a dialogue, I love to learn, and I love to imagine and to create and to think about what's possible, and I love the challenge of the unknown. What's of particular interest to me is the unknown unknowns, right? That fourth knowledge quadrant, right? This Donald Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns. So, yeah, if there's anything that anybody who's made it this far in the podcast is curious about or wants to bounce an idea off of, please, I welcome it. This is me reaching out to you saying thank you for making it this far, and I do want to talk to you. I want to hear from you. It is how we learn. I would love to share some of the stuff that I've learned too. And if we all do that together, we succeed as a big team, and everybody makes progress. So, would absolutely love the opportunity. And I would just say, yeah, just stay curious and find good, like-minded people, and also people who disagree with you too. Those are important.
Right.
But yeah, that would be it.
Very
Just
important.
old-fashioned teamwork.
Okay, and that's a wrap for today's episode of Vibe It Up. I hope you enjoyed our insightful conversation with Michael Silva. And before we go, I want to extend you a big thank you to our guest for sharing his valuable experience and perspective here. So, thank you very much, Michael. It was a very pleasant discussion with you. How did you feel today?
I feel honored to be here, Dan, and look forward to talking with you again.
Sure. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye bye.